Hey gang, I'm archeologist and this is my show, also known as. On today's show, I have the cast of my novel Jimmy Dean's Last Dance. They include celebrated Audie Award winner and audio narration coach Johnny Heller, actor and photographer Joanna Perrin, educator, actor, psychologist and owner of Distinguished Beard Neil Hellegers, theatre actor and audio narrator Bill Lord, 21-year US Army veteran, project manager and audio narrator Joya Colluci-Lord, owner of Spectrum Publishing, and all-round nice person Anneliese Rennie, and author of 8-Bit Bastards, cover artist, editor and archeologist Joshua Mason. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and let's get started with also known as the cast of Jimmy Dean's Last Dance. Hey guys, so it's great to finally see you all in person, and I am really grateful to you all for joining the show today. So whoa, that was a
New
loud
York
noise.
City, my friend.
Truck just went through. Yeah.
That's all right. That's okay. New York City. So so for me, it's been a really unique experience. Hey, there you go. That's okay. That's all right. It's all part of the ambiance. No. Leave the window open. It's fine. So
Veritas.
So it's a unique experience working with a group of people, particularly like when you're on the other side of the world from them, but then also the fact that you guys are spread all across the US. One thing that I picked up from working with all of you is that there seems to be a really tight community in the audio narration field, and so I wanted to tap into that a little bit and see, has that always been the case, or is that something that's developed over time with technology getting better and people able to connect in a more meaningful way, or is that something that like has always been there from the start? It's part of the DNA of audio narration.
Say it's the DNA of.
I'm going to say it's in the DNA of actors. I mean, we all just kind of support each other, and there's a term that comes up so frequently that I hear is a rising tide floats all boats.
Yeah. Okay.
So we all help each other out. So I think it's just the DNA of actors.
Yes, but I think audiobook narrators more specifically, because there's competition in other acting fields that you don't see in the audiobook world, or at least I don't see it.
Well, you're kind of the unifying factor, aren't you, Kelly? You kind of like you're the reason we're all here, really. I mean, that for me is another thing, like I as an author, and Josh might be able to speak about this as well. As an author, it is really solitary. And so going to an audio narration is a step outside of that solitary world, because you're connecting with a lot of different people, and you sort of your work is now being handled by multiple hands. So maybe it's just from the perspective of an author, it seems like that community is a lot like it's a new thing. So I guess
what we've seen the past couple of years is this. I think historically, I agree with Anneliese. I think that certainly as long as I've been in this industry, it's always been a tremendous kind of welcoming and like, here, let me show you. Like I even I did the pick the brain of a narrator thing, which I know now you're not supposed to do unless you buy them lots of coffee and maybe a steak dinner or something. But I totally did that, and she was completely open to welcoming me into the community, and it kind of fostered me meeting other people. So I think that I feel like that feeling's always been there, maybe on a local physical level, but I think the past couple of years, this community is really held together because we were already used to working in boxes separately. And so we figured out how to be supportive with each other, how to connect with each other. It means a lot of Facebook, which is a necessary evil sometimes, but we do it largely to keep those tethers together and to keep this community kind of going as everything kind of changes. So, I mean, I can see Johnny. I could go see Johnny. I could get on the subway and see Johnny and Joe in like hour and a half, depends on the trains.
7 hours get back.
Yeah, give or take.
If I can add too, I think Joanna and I have been, since we've been in the business, and I've been in a very long time now, worked very hard to help foster the community aspect of it, because it is a bit of a solitary gig. You know, you're working alone. One of the reasons audiobooks are so giant now is the proliferation of home studios and actors working in their own home studio. But when I started, that wasn't the case. But we've really, and we, I mean the whole narrator community, it's really opened up their hearts. It's one of the most giving, wonderful communities anyone can be a part of. And as Kelly mentioned, it's not, it's because the competition isn't the same. Not that I'm fighting Bill or Neil for a job. We're all looking for work all the time, but there's a lot of books. There's a lot of people. And I think that there is a warmth and a real community spirit among the narrator community, both publishers and actors and authors. And it's a real joy to be a part of that. I think that while we're the smallest mountain in the entertainment mountain range, the top of our hill is kind of a comfortable place. There's enough money to live on, and it's pleasant.
Yeah, so I guess that kind of touches on a point that I was interested in. I've seen a lot of posts about AI narration, and yeah, I can see your face,
Johnny.
Johnny.
Go there? You're really gonna go there?
No, look, hey, this is no holds barred. This is no holds barred podcast, but I guess
I think we're supposed to drink when we say AI. Isn't that how that works?
I think so.
Yeah.
So I think
again.
what I'm hearing is that detracts from the community, right? Like it feels like having that presence there, it takes away from something from that community, because now it's not a person you're dealing with, it's just a recording, and it's not a recording in the truest sense of the word, that it's a recording of someone's performance. It's a recording of someone just repeating words and being modulated or produced into a semblance of something else. Look, I don't know all the backgrounds of AI recording, but like what I feel, just even talking for this brief time with you guys during the production of Jimmy Dean's, is that you guys interact with each other. Maybe the way that you, particularly in a multicast scenario, you kind of leverage off each other's performances, and when you have something that's artificial, that is taken away. Is that a fair assessment?
I think you used the word.
I would say, to whatever extent it currently is I think still in the ether. I think that as at present, where AI or machine learning is being used in a way that would actually threaten actual human storytelling, we're probably not on it right now. We're at the sort of good enough stage. Is it good enough to be misunderstood as being AI in the first place and sort of sneak its way into Audible sale, which as it's not supposed to be done? Can it reach that level? What areas is that being serviced? Are those books that narrators will do? Are those the same kind of starter books that narrators need to do in order to get a foothold in this growing industry? Is a growing backlist that is claimed to be, by the people who are doing this, there's this massive millions of books could never be produced, so we're just going to do those guys, and they are doing that. That's how they're making, that's how they're existing. But I think that all comes back to it in terms of your book, for example, because I thought about this because this was happening concurrently. If you were to use any of the historical figures in this book and represent them, from JFK on down, right? You could probably, I thought about this watching For All Mankind, in that show on Apple TV.
It's yeah. That's a good show.
Alternate really history timeline, right? So relevant. But they do like modulations of Reagan's voice and John F. Kennedy's voice and things like that, saying whatever they want them to say. So couldn't you just plug in LBJ into the scene, like, and take all of his samples of everything he's ever recorded and generate something about that? Yes, that is probably something that can be done, and we have to assume down the line that could be done as well. But is that, in the end of the day, licensing for whoever that person is, all the other sort of things, when it's the only option out there, it's going to get more expensive than the low cost that is only producers, it's not listeners making. But at the end of the day, you have an actor looking at a historical given character and be like, okay, how do I do Marilyn Monroe? And just do it. It's always going to be more alive, even if it's not more accurate. It's not going to just be good enough. It's going to be that and better. And that's a quality that is brought readily in independent productions like this. That is, and And I think also what Spectrum has done a lot of work with, which has been fantastic. Like you say, making that kind of bridge, between independent and production work. So that's the name of the game right now. And until that changes, all we can do is keep that community strong and support each other and advocate for each other. And that's what's going to strengthen that community to come through the looming thread of machine learning. I prefer to call it that. That sounds colder.
And Johnny, I guess a question for you and maybe Kelly as well. So obviously there's been advances in tech. Johnny, you've got your coaching work that you do, and Kelly, you've got the production work. So those advances in technology where there is that backlog of work that Neil's talking about, do you have to adapt? Is that something that you kind of look to include in your kind of coaching and your production work, where you're addressing that that increase in speed of delivery or the increase in demand? Is that something that you look at when you're doing that work?
For me, in terms of coaching, no. What I like to coach, and my coaching is based on performance-based coaching, acting in the moment, being connected to what the author wrote. When you wrote Jim Dean's Last Dance, and every moment, every one of these actors was in that moment playing the emotion that the characters felt through your words. I don't believe that's a human. That's acting is an art for humans. I think I don't know how to teach. I teach the existence of AI, that it's out there. I mean, everybody knows it. I mean, I'm not blind to it, but nothing I can say or do from an acting standpoint is going to change anyone. You're not going to be better. Nobody's going to be a better AI actor because of something I said. A vacuum cleaner is going to sound like a vacuum cleaner. That's all there is to it. I think if we learn anything from sci-fi films, if you start letting machines do your shit for you, then can I say that? You're gonna
swear, please.
They are gonna rise up, and you're gonna be killed by your blender while you sleep.
Right. The singularity is a much larger threat to our entire existence than just AI audiobooks.
Before we get too far off the track, you asked about production, and I actually want to bring Josh in because Josh does something really unique as a writer.
Okay, Josh. Put on the spot.
What am I speaking to here, Kelly?
Your VR rig.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
I do a lot of my writing. I write about VR usually. I write a game lit RPG, which is what Johnny's narrating currently, and a lot of it's trapped inside of a virtual reality space. The plot of the game, you're usually trapped inside somehow or forced inside. I do my writing from within virtual reality. I got my Oculus Quest headset here, and you can actually.
Are you typing in there? Or are you writing with an imaginary quill? How do you do it?
No, I'm dictating.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Dictating with a dragon dictation. So I'll be playing like Skyrim VR or something on my headset, and like watching the dragons circle overhead while I'm actually dictating a book. And it's actually one of the craziest experiences I've ever had.
I've got a Quest 2 as well, and I've got to say, I've had the PlayStation VR and the Quest 2, and it is this weird experience where you kind of transported from your living room.
Lost here, so I
Anyway, so yeah, I get what you're saying, Josh. It's an experience. It's definitely taking yourself away. But I guess bringing it back is from when you first started out to now in audio narration and also production. I mean, one of the first time I ever met Kelly, was on I think the first fictional book that I'd written, and that was to do with AI and technology and tapping into my own fears about how technology was going to impact on humans, and but it was set kind of 5 years from now, and it was quasi dystopian, but I was looking at how things were changing. So for you as actors and performers in this space, how has it changed? Is it different in the way that you do your performance? Does it inform the delivery of your performance, or is it more or less the same? Is it just you in a booth performing? Johnny, you spoke about that it's all about the performance and the acting, and is that just consistent all the time?
I don't want to take over all the chatting, but I think audiobook narration is an acting art, plain and simple. And while it's different than being on stage or being in a film or being in a commercial. It's an actor's job. It's an actor's art. The taking an author's words, an author's scenes, an author's story, and sharing them with the listener is the art of storytelling and acting. I don't think it changes at all because somewhere on the distant horizon is an AI. I don't think that influences us at all. Our job in any given script is to be in that script, in that moment, in that second, and share that way. I don't think that changes whether you're on stage for your Wednesday matinee or whether you're in the booth on chapter 3. I think wherever the actor is, they're absolutely obsessed with, involved with, and in communion with this moment in time, this beat, this second, where the humans, or even if it's a machine, have that can feel. If it's an AI dystopian futuristic thing, whatever the machine or the goblin or the demon or the couch feels, we're playing. Because all emotion is human. We put it into our toasters, but it's still a human emotion.
And with regards to production, yes, technology changes all the time, and there's always new tools, and there's always new software, and there's always a new interface, and there are groups dedicated to audio recording tech. So that part of it changes, but it's incremental, it's small. I think it's safe to say it's not huge changes. There is a vendor out there that has automated book proofing, audio book proofing. I personally am not a fan. I've made it very clear that Spectrum will not use it ever. And I've told the owner of the company that in writing multiple times that, one, I don't like taking jobs away from people. My job is actually to provide jobs for people. That's really what my job is, and that's kind of how I do everything that I do. And if it makes me a Luddite and it makes me analog, well, then I'm just going to wear that tiara with pride. But I will use the tech that is available so that I can do multicast books with 14 narrators in 4 countries and, all the, goofy, crazy things that I do. But, very, very recently, I trademarked human voices for human ears. And
that's a great phrase. I love that.
That's because you wrote it.
It was originally said by a machine in the 30s.
Right. But the point is that so a human actor is going to voice this role. A human author wrote the role. A human proofer is going to make sure that that book is, validating the intent of the author, validating the hard work that the narrator has put in. I mean, and a human is going to engineer it, because if human ears aren't listening to it all the way through, at some point it's going to fail. And it may not be a big failure. It may be, little clicks and clacks and this, that, and the other thing. Josh knows exactly what I'm talking about right now. And
Squeak.
There you private joke, sorry. We've been engineering the same book over a few times. Let's just put it that way. But the point is that this is very much a human endeavor, and we can all get nervous and scared about AI. I do, but I still think, like Neil says, that we're not quite there. It's a way off, and if people want to make that choice, that's their choice to make. I think that there's always going to be a core audience that will not embrace it under any circumstances.
Hey, I don't know if you can see Billy has his hand out if he's on your screen.
Yeah. Bill, go for it.
So I'm gonna flip this around a little bit. Have you ever written a character and then heard that character in audio and you went, "Oh my God, they friggin' nailed it"?
Yeah, all of it with Jimmy Dean. I mean, I listened to that, and actually, no, I would take it back even further. When Kelly did, there was a character in Future's Orphans, which is the first book that I've got produced for audio, and Kelly that one of the characters has got a really unique dialect. It's like I call it Shakespearean ghetto, and Kelly nailed it. This kid was like, a street kid that had a really weird way of talking, and Kelly just bought it. She
Yeah, but you're not telling them the 3 months that it took me to get to that point, and how many times I emailed you and said, oh, I can't do this,
but you did it. And when I listened to that performance, that I nearly cried. I was like, this is my words and my world being brought to life by someone that had this passion that was just insurmountable, and far exceeded anything that I had expected, so I think, in answer to your question, Bill, that is, that's the moment that I felt. So yeah, definitely.
I mean, I have to feel like the same for the same reason that like it's harder to act. AI is looming is going to get me. I better do a good job in this. Like that's a concern to have, but that's a lot harder to actually act on the page or on the stage as even an immediate sense of like this AI is going to physically get me, because it's not by accident that storytelling is this really old human art. Like any early human art, whether it's painting on the walls or oral story traditions predating written traditions by centuries or what have you. That's not an accident that human communication, human storytelling is like one of the things that we just do. So it's like,
this is exactly the point that I was trying.
An AI? Will you be able to? Will you be able to tweak an AI to create a dialect that you can use consistently that has the characteristics that you tick off of a list? Like, yeah, probably, maybe eventually, but will it be as good of a? It'll be accurate. It'll be good enough. Again, it'll be good enough, passable thing. But will it be as good as what your experience was hearing Kelly do that? It's really ineffable and hard to believe that the human storytelling instinct that is as old as time won't always be better in the end.
Right.
Will always be the unique, pure experience of it.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
Bill, that's okay. So Bill, like that question that you asked, like, from like, maybe Joya would be a good person to talk about this, coming in as someone that's fairly new to audio narration. What's your experience been going from something that isn't about the performance? Like, obviously, your background is the US Army, if I've got that right, and
Yes.
You've transitioned into civilian life and now into audio narration. So what was the experience for you, coming from a place that you'd had these experiences that were fairly professional, career driven, and obviously a lifelong career, into something that's new and exciting? What was your experience in that?
So it's interesting you should ask, because I was in probably one of the more creative areas of the military, because I was an interpreter. So I basically got to tell the stories of many people in my own language, either telling the story of Americans in Russian or in Italian, or telling the stories of Italians and Russians in English, which is a storytelling thing of its own and a brain shift between languages. But when I retired from the Army and I was working in government contracting, I became a huge consumer of audiobooks. And this was before Bill and I were even dating, let alone married. And I've listened to Johnny, I've listened to Joanna, I've listened to Bill, I've listened to all of these people who I know very well, intimately. And when I listen to a book that they have narrated, I don't hear them. I hear the story. So I think that's the hallmark of what I aspire to, is I don't want somebody to hear me read a book. I want someone to hear the story, and it happens to be my voice, but it could be any number of my voices.
Almost especially the authors.
Well, yes, but I mean, they hear the sound of my voice, but they need to hear the author's intent. And being able to listen to a book that my husband narrated and not to recognize it as his voice is incredible. So that, I guess that's what I aspire to.
I've listened to a bit of a AI narration just to see what the fuss was about, and there's an uncanny valley there. That's like, you know, it's like when you see a robot or a computer graphics image or something like that that looks really close to human, but it's not. And like the first time I listened to an AI, I didn't know I was listening to an AI for about maybe 30 seconds, but then there was just kind of this, I don't know, heebie-jeebie thing that kind of crept over me, and I'm like, oh, this is not a human. This is bad. I mean, I couldn't get through it more than a minute. But I mean,
start feeling like itchy
better,
around the collar. It was like, what's wrong? It's like reality.
Because
there's one author that he writes like kind of cyberpunk. I forgot his name, but he put on Twitter that he's like, guess what? I just released my audiobook and it's narrated by an AI, and he just got torn apart on Twitter. It was like,
oh yeah, I tried. I tore
the book
myself.
removed. Yeah.
It didn't go where he thought it was going. He was also proud of it because it was about AI, and he's like, and it's narrated by an AI, and it's like,
well, but he didn't seem to have any. To the guy's credit, he didn't seem to have a malicious intent about it. Like he was only like, oh, I'm hearing now that this is a problem. And then reacted.
Yeah, he didn't know. He didn't know.
And he responded. The book's no longer up, and he responded to. He's like, okay. It's curious in a way that he didn't hear that conversation about it, but that's why it's important that we do talk about it, and we make an effort to kind of, let it known out there. By the way, this is something that's on the horizon, so people can respond to it. Listeners, by and large, are like, what the heck are you talking about? Considering the scrutiny that they give to our human narrations in terms of like, I heard a sibling death, they're going to like the way that what Josh is describing about, that sort of unsettling, like, wait, why'd you say it like that? Who says it like that? That unless you have a human to go through and like bend every convincing syllable into a different convincing direction, again, that's human production, but it's just that's how that goes. So and so that's another reason why that the human presence is as weird and as it can be, and as beautiful and elegant as it can be, or awkward or wrong. Like even the errors, people like they are part of the experience. It's like when it rains when you're doing outdoor theater. Everyone's like, it's raining on all of us. They like that, and they enjoy that human connection, I think, as much.
Yeah.
And again, they're not saving money from this. That's like the savings are not being passed on to the listeners. So to them, it's like, why would we pay the same dollar for a licensed version of a voice?
And maybe that's what it's about as well. It's a finance driven decision. But I guess moving away from AI, because it obviously is a little bit of a touchy subject. It's a touchy. It feels like a touchy subject. But I don't.
Should we go back to the pandemic? Right.
Let's stay away from that. So, in Western Australia, we live in a bubble. We don't know about the pandemic; doesn't exist. So, but I guess Joanna might be able to speak about this a little bit. Like all of you seem to be multidisciplined in some way, shape, or form. Johnny with his teaching and acting narration, audio narration. Bill's a theatre performer as well as an audio narrator. Neil, video games, film, TV, and audio narration. Kelly, opera singing, and audio narration and producing and announcing. But Joanna, you kind of you've got this nice mix of there's photography. When I was reading your bio, there's photography. There's and there's a lot of nonfiction work as well. And one of the things that I thought about when I was reading your bio was, what are you actually, when you're doing a nonfiction audio narration, do you pick up stuff by osmosis, because you're reading the nonfiction work and it's sort of almost like a learning text? What's been your experience as opposed to fiction with nonfiction? Do you suddenly get an informal degree in a subject
Everything.
because you're narrating it? I'd be interested to know.
You kind of do. There was a period where I was doing a lot of psychology books, and I joked on Facebook one day. I said, when people come in, I don't ask them to sit down. I say, would you lie down on my couch now? So you do kind of get a mini education with a lot of nonfiction. And if it's a topic I can intrinsically understand the way it's written, that's great. If it's a topic I don't know anything about, like brain surgery, I kind of do dummy books. What I do is I research online, and I'll take a quick course on the subject so that I know what I'm talking about. Because there's not a lot of difference, except for the research and stuff. There's not a lot of difference between fiction and nonfiction. It's still trying to deliver as honestly as possible whatever the author is trying to deliver. So if it's brain surgery, for all intents and purposes, I am now a brain surgeon. I wrote this book because my character is that author. And so, yeah, it becomes a mini education in brain surgery, or, you know, whatever it is, quantum leap. I mean, you know, leaping. It's kind of anything the topic is, you do become a mini expert in, at least during the duration of that book. I'm not sure if, you know, 5 years later, I'd be able to quote things, but while you're doing that book, you do get so immersed. If you're doing your research well, and also using your acting of being in the book, yeah, you are that person, and you did just get a mini course in whatever the topic and subject is.
Do you feel the other disciplines creeping in? Do you, like, you know, you've obviously done photography, so that's a very visual medium. Does it seems like there would be this disconnect, but I can also imagine that as you're narrating, or you're talking about something, that visual, and also for you other guys as well, you know, the way I know when I write, I'm very cinematic, and I almost frame the scene as I'm writing, you know. But what about with narration, or you know, that does that visual medium come in? You know, Bill, you're a theater performer. Do you physicalize your performance when you're narrating, or is it, you know, what's the crossover?
If I can make a joke, we all can write off our Netflix and Hulu subscriptions. Seriously. because we use it all for research. You know, yeah.
Can you really?
Yeah.
Can you really do that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You know, AK, when you talk about the idea of I like the idea of cinematography as a conduit to share from an acting standpoint. I think we all have theater backgrounds. I mean, Joanna was on stage, I've been on stage. Neil, we've all had some theater backgrounds. But I think what happens is when you write, whatever you write, you see the scene that you're creating. And I think it's true whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I think all of us have done all that stuff. And I think what happens is, from the acting standpoint, the actor needs to see whatever it is that AK wrote in that scene. The scene you visualized, like when you sit down and read Lord of the Rings, and when Gandalf comes to the Shire for the first thing, we've all seen the film, and it works so well because it's exactly what Tolkien wrote. We see that. It's a perfect image in the picture. And I think when we see the images, and I think the actor in audiobooks needs to have some idea that he's something of a cinematographer. We are the camera. We see the scene the author wrote and share that scene so that the listener, it's the same as reading, sees what the author wants them to see. So I think and I'm sure, I don't want to speak for Joanna, but the photography thing must come in because there are visual images constantly, fiction or nonfiction.
Yeah, fiction, exactly, fiction, nonfiction. If you don't, as an actor, if you don't see whatever those words are in your mind's eye, it's impossible, at least for me, it's impossible to translate it. So yeah, I visually see it. Maybe that's why I'm drawn to photography. I'm not
great eye for it. Great photography.
It's not because it's sometimes someone will say to me, like in a headshot, they'll say, "No one's ever captured that angle. What did you do?" And I'll say, "I didn't do anything. I saw you. My mind saw it. The camera saw it, and it just told me to snap." It wasn't like I stood there and figured it out. It wasn't like I went, lighting and the shadow. I mean, I did that in advance by setting it up, but when I knew when it was right because I could see it. And that's a lot of acting. You know it's right when you can see it in your mind's eye and then do it or say it. So yeah, I think it's very visual, and the photography they certainly interplay with each other.
Yeah. And I guess taking it one step further, direction, you know, like, so I don't know, I don't know all the particulars about it, but like in audio narration, is there, and you know, Kelly or Neil might be able to speak about this one, Neil from the perspective of video games, or Kelly from the perspective of production, but how does direction factor into your performance? Do you lean into the person that's putting the thing together to inform your performance as well, or is it fairly like independent, or is it very much like a theater or a film or a TV performance where the director, you know, has this vision and they inform the vision and they kind of set the scene for what the performance is going to be, you know, or maybe just a foundation?
I think it's based on the project. Some projects probably require more direction. I know a lot of the bigger publishers do bring in directors and create that entire world. But in this particular instance, with Jimmy Dean's Last Dance, and probably, you know, 95% of the audiobooks that are out there, I mean, maybe that number isn't that big. Narrators are expected to self-direct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yep.
no, maybe, sort of. Brady
Yeah.
Bunch,
Yeah.
no?
I think that's what usually happens, and so you have to, as AK put it, is that you have to have that base of foundation to kind of keep yourself on task doing that. But you have to also recognize, and like Kelly was saying, like, what is the book at hand here? Like a scene from Jimmy Dean's, like you have two historical figures talking to each other. It's alternate history. These conversations didn't happen. But we've all read nonfiction where they have dialogue scenes between two historical characters sitting down for the first time. So if you're the actor at home and you're doing a scene like, oh, it's a scene between Hunter S. Thompson and Elvis, like if you're playing it for nonfiction, you're contextualizing, like Joe was saying, you're contextualizing the character of the author who wanted to tell you about this amazing time that Hunter S. Thompson and Elvis talked to each other. And you present it like that. And that's your direction for that scene. So that's what the director would essentially tell you to do. But if it's a scene where it's at a particular part in the story and it's connected to the larger arc of what's happening, and the intention of it is to maybe more occupy those characters while picking apart, you know, which era of Hunter S. Thompson are we talking about? What is Elvis like in this alternate reality? What's happened to him? But those are all acting questions. They're the same thing as, you know, and so you're directing yourself to ask yourself a different set of questions to a different objective. And so you just have, for every book you do, and it could be two books in the same genre, two different gamelet have very different foundations, are built on very different foundations, and that foundation is it's technique and experience and instincts, and you're getting a lot from the author, thankfully, because that's who we're in service of in the end. And you direct yourself as such, and you try to keep that going. That's the hardest part if you're self-directing, is just keeping that motivation going and keeping on task with yourself.
When I was researching your bio, Neil, I saw that you did some work with Red Dead Redemption 2, and it's one of my favorite games. One of my favorite games of all time. So
have you beat the crap out of me? Have you?
I did. I was just about to say I have beaten the crap out of you.
You could spend a good amount of time. It's Roger Clark, who's also a narrator. Who's
He's amazing.
He's fantastic. Yeah, and he was just like that was. It's a weird gig, but it was fun. Yeah,
but it was funny. It was funny when I read that, because it's, you know, 6 degrees of separation. Obviously, I hadn't met you before Jimmy Dean's, but I'd shared that experience indirectly with you. You know, and I think that's the thing that personally I get out of audio books, is that you're taken on a journey by the performer. That you sometimes wouldn't get if you were just reading it off the page, you know, because it's like an echo chamber. You know, the performance is in your head. It's very much like what I was saying earlier about the framing, the cinematography. You know, you have that image in your head, you have it, but it's when it's contextualized by someone's voice, it's taking you out of that, out of your head, and putting it there in a sort of an oral sense where you're now surrounded by it, and it's really it can be a bit overwhelming if the performer's a really strong performer as well, you know. So that was interesting, and I guess that leads into the next question that I've got, which is about maintaining levels over such a long time, because, you know, typically audio narration, like Jimmy Dean's, is pretty short as far as I know, but you know, some other books run for 25, 30 hours. How do you keep that endurance? How do you keep that stamina level up where where you're maintaining that consistent performance throughout? I know that obviously it's not done in one chunk, but it must be exhausting. It must be quite fatiguing to do that work.
If I could jump in on that one, because I've actually done 4 narrations all in the same series, and all the books are 20, 24, 17. I mean, incredibly long books. And, obviously there are technical things that you do to keep everything in line, but, those characters ultimately kind of become your family, especially if you're doing a series. I know that's probably going to sound a little weird, but you're with them for so long, and they take a lot out of you, but they also give you the opportunity to grow incredibly as a narrator, especially if you're doing it over a series that is, running in a linear timeline. So I think that's where the energy comes from, is
that and cocaine.
Hey.
I wanted to make a point, though,
reading
because
books about cocaine, narration.
Reading books
Joanna-
about cocaine, of course.
Joanna said something, and I kind of wanted to come full circle with it, and because you also mentioned, Adam, about the whole 6 degrees of separation. But the truth is, the audiobook world is probably the biggest small town you'll ever live in. And, like, when we're doing books, so Joanna's got this nonfiction, and maybe it's got like 10 pages of math in it. And in the narration community, there is a math guy, Kyle Tate. We all know if we're having problems having to narrate something having to do with math, we just go to Kyle. If we need military terminology, we go to Basil Sands. Everybody kind of brings other skill sets to the table and then shares them with everybody. And it makes it a really incredible job to have, because you're in a little tiny box talking to yourself all day, but the truth is there's a few thousand people in there with you that if you reach out to them with a text or a Facebook message or a phone call, they've got your back right there. Yeah.
I think that's the thing that I noticed as well. Like, I would never have started this podcast if I hadn't have met Kelly, because she kind of gave me the courage to branch out of my comfort zone and do something. This is incredibly intimidating.
Hide under your stairs. I know you're hiding under your stairs.
I am hiding under my stairs, but it's incredibly intimidating when you're talking to people that work in the field day in and day out, and you're worried about your dog barking or your child bursting into the studio or whatever, But I think the thing that I picked up, and going back to what Kelly said, is that community is really tight and really a really supportive one, and just having you all here, and also the experience that I shared, not just with the narrators, but also Kelly from production and Josh, was just this overwhelming. It took me, the last year for me has been this real journey of discovery, and part of that was writing and getting Jimmy Dean's produced. But I think what I learned was that I was dealing with different personalities, and you're all in the same space, but you're all so individual in different ways, and I just have to commend you all for the way that you brought me into the fold and sort of made me feel a part of the group when the title was being produced, because it was really scary for me to think that there were a lot of people investing so much time and effort into something that I'd kind of created from bare bones. So thanks, guys. Just wanted to take a little thank you moment.
May I ask you a question, AK?
Yeah, go for it.
We haven't really talked much about the book, Jimmy Dean's Last Dance. And I wanted to ask you some questions, and everybody else who wants to. You've created, I don't know if you realize, you've created a whole different genre, if you will. It's futuristic, alternative history, sci-fi. It's bizarre. It's Tarantino-esque in that you've taken historical figures and rewritten that. Not it's not even Elvis as Elvis, really. I mean, he's not the singer he was. James Dean's not the actor he is, and you've created this alternative history in this world. And I wonder, A, where you got the idea, and B, what led to that, and how much research did it take for you to? Did you pick Jimmy Dean first and pair him with Elvis? I don't know how you did all this. And my dog wants to know as well.
That's okay. I was worried about my dog, but that's fine.
Stop.
Your dog's taking all the glory. It's okay. It's
That's
okay.
right.
But look, it started with the Nighthawks painting, or the variant of the Nighthawks painting with the lonely figures in the diner. But then someone had created this variant of them, which was James Dean, Elvis, Marilyn, and Bogart.
Right.
And when I was a kid, that's the first version of it that I saw, and I loved it. Right. There was something about all these famous people. And, I've always been a bit of a left field thinker, but, the thing that struck me was they were all lonely. And I thought about the impact of fame and the impact of celebrity on the person and the individual. And then I thought, if you took that away, would they have anything left? And so for me, it was this, what I thought was that I guess it's kind of similar to the audio narration world in a way, is that you develop an informal family. And that's also something that I found from the writing community. I'm a gregarious guy, but I'm fairly solitary as well. And I've always identified with James Dean, thinking that he was actually quite a lonely person, that filled his life with threat, which ultimately led to his demise. So if you took the fame out of it and you made him this figure that was sort of someone that was pushing the boundaries because they didn't have anything else, and then they found this connection to someone that was also in a similar situation but was also famous, and then they lost them, what would that mean, and what would they replace it with? And Elvis kind of acts as this voice of reason for Jimmy. He's like, come on, snap out of it. And
Elvis Presley, the voice of reason.
I don't know, but
that's alternative.
But alternate history, he stayed where he was, and he grew up where he was, and he became who he was, and he's a very matter of fact. And I imagine that if we all fall victim to influence, we all fall victim to things that alter our path. And I felt that these characters would have a different path if they weren't exposed to that influence. And so I wanted to write about that, but I also loved Chandler. I also loved, those Hammett. I love those noir kind of those noir elements. But I also love the 1960s as well, so I wanted to, it was kind of like chuck them in a blender and see what falls out. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And the first scene I actually wrote was where Jimmy's getting beaten up by the thugs. And the desperation that I captured in that made me want to write more. And it was I'd kind of hit a wall with I'd hit a wall with my writing. I didn't know what to write next. And that I suddenly was filled with this passion to write more. That told me it was the right thing to write. It wasn't just writing something next in a series. And, like part of me wants to, take the bait and write commercially and do all those kinds of things. But I felt that this was a story that needed to be told, because particularly now where we're so connected, but we're so alone. And
it's a wonderful story, and a great. So those of you paying attention to this who are maybe haven't read the book or heard the book, it's a great book. It's just great.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's one of those, as you're prepping it, I had to be like, wait, hold on, slow down. This is for prep. This is for prep. So,
it was a wonderful read.
Thank you.
Can I ask an alternate or counterfactual history question? Because I'm interested in what you just said about how one of the things you changed in terms of what constitutes this alternate timeline. And in a sci-fi way, it's like a futuristic view or an alternate view of something that ultimately demonstrates something about the culture that it's being written from. And what you said about being alone, like, what do you think? So there's two changes, at least that we see in this universe, right? Elvis doesn't become Elvis. and Jimmy Dean's star never quite rose in the same way it did. It's like nearby but adjacent, right?
And Lincoln doesn't get assassinated.
Oh, well, that's my question. Like, does it
My
go back? How far?
My favorite line in the whole book.
the fact that, like, you know, it's, as I understand, like an alternate history could be based off a singular large event. There are things that are consistent, like you see that with Marilyn in this book, right? But does it go that far back? And then what I kept thinking about was, moving forward, this is a different timeline. You've already built yourself a counterfactual world. I don't know if you like Harry Turtledove has done this like time and time again about like the Civil War goes differently because someone drops McClellan's maps, and so the South secedes, and there's the CSA and the USA, and then he's got a dozen books or so tracking that alternate history of the United States all the way through World War II. And it's pretty nuts, actually. But but it says something about how warlike we are now, and as we always have been. That if there was the opportunity to nuke Philadelphia, we would nuke Philadelphia, and he does in fact nuke Philadelphia. But I thought with this, it's like you have this whole thing set up now. JFK's alive. He can get assassinated. What's going to happen to to this world now? I want to know. Well,
I kind of I looked at it from the perspective that I really like. There's a book by Stephen King, 11/22/63, you know, and he talks about the Kennedy assassination and how changing that event might not necessarily make things better. It might actually just change things, right? Because as you say, Neil, as a species, we're fairly aggressively territorial and warlike, and you know, we have the capacity for great good, and we have the capacity for great evil as well, you know. And I think I always like this quote from Shakespeare: "There's neither good nor bad, yet thinking makes it so." And for me, that was, and I don't know whether I've paraphrased or got it exactly right, but the intent is the same, you know, is that it doesn't matter if Kennedy survives or not. What matters is that it will be different. It will just be a different theme. It might not be better, it might not be worse, but you know, you can already see the kind of, at the end of the book, these kind of tendrils that are starting to spread out, and the repercussions that are starting to spread out, you know, where there's increased presence in Cuba, because that's something that they're worrying about. And is that a gateway to Russia? You know, and are there more, and you know, is there more connection? Look, I'm not a historian. I did research for this book, and I was scared of getting it wrong, even though it was an alternate timeline. I wanted to make it real enough that it felt tangible and it felt like something that could actually happen. But I do love history, and I love the way that, you know, a single thing could change the entire course of things. You know, it's that butterfly effect. And going back to Johnny's earlier question, you know, in terms of research, I looked at events that on the surface were big events, but in actual fact, if you contextualize them against the entirety of human history, they're quite small. You know, like the Kennedy assassination is huge because it was televised. You know, Lincoln's assassination is equally as huge, and we know a lot about it, but it doesn't have the same impact because it's so far removed. It's not televised, and sort of this ties into something that I was talking about with Kelly early days with Future's Orphans. The past isn't any more dangerous than the future. It's just got a better publicist. You know, so the future, that, you know, and it's true, you know, we all in some ways have become publicists, you know, like Josh will be able to speak about this with writing, you know, like you have to be a self-promoter, you have to put yourself out there, you have to, and that's a part of the work that I hate the most, you know, that you're out there and you're promoting, even talking about it now, you know, I feel like a bit squirmy because this is your show, it's not my show. You know,
actually, you know what's funny, you say that. And Josh, we had some of the weirdest reactions when we started doing promotion for this book.
Yeah, God, the Facebook group, we put a Facebook ad out, and everybody's like, somebody's like, that did not happen. JFK was a good man. And he started going on this complete rant. It's like the work of fiction, guy. It's yeah.
It
and other
crazy.
people were answering them and buying into it. And I was like, this is not an
Well,
autobiography.
Never
as a sign of the
underestimate
times, now we
people's
live in a
abilities.
reality where if you read it on the internet, like it must be true, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly right.
like there are people talking about how the Lincoln assassination, there's, you know, like a new kind of like sub thing about that one of the conspirators who wasn't hung was the real person and it wasn't Booth, and people are like, no, he kind of jumped on stage.
Yeah, it
but
was.
yeah,
It
but
was-
there's
I
no
was there.
video of it.
You were there. Well, Johnny, you're a bit of a history buff, and you know you like when you were reading Jimmy Dean's, you know, what was your feel? Did it feel wrong to you? Did it, like, even though you knew it was a fictional piece, did it make you feel uncomfortable? You know, that history was essentially being you know, it was revisionist not
just revisionist, it's alternative. And so it's what it is the characters were basically true to their character. They were who they were, just as you said, in the different in sci-fi, there's all these parallel timelines. Like somewhere there is a Johnny Heller who is reserved, who isn't me, who
and doesn't do cocaine
and maybe understands technical crap. But so when I read it, like I was not a student. I had to watch some Jimmy Dean films because I hadn't really. Elvis I knew. I've read, but I literally cried when he died. That's why I liked Elvis. So I knew that. So I wasn't worried about Elvis. It was Jimmy Dean stuff I wasn't sure about. But as the story progressed, it was this character who is Jimmy Dean, but in this alternate time and place, and this character who's Elvis, but in a different time and place, and this LBJ, and this John Kennedy, and Marilyn Monroe, and all these people who interacted differently because it isn't the history that we know. So in terms of it's not it's not historically accurate. However, it's based on historical people interacting true to their natures in this time and place, in these other series of events. And I found it absolutely fascinating. And I think it's like a Quentin Tarantino film. It's like, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where things, if you're, the changes that are made in the world you wrote is not the real world, but it is a world that could have existed.
One of those changes, there's and you said this before as well too, there's certain things that change, but certain things do largely stay the same. And seeing where things diverge and where different, and you create a different path, when that swerves back to something, I think the term for it is an attractor, like the things that have a high degree of probability of being consistent over more timelines versus unlikely ones which have a lower percentage, right? So it really shines a spotlight on what those attractors are. Like, what are the driving cultural elements that will swerve this rapidly different outcome back to what would be one timeline even, and continue on, or be more or less, mathematically indistinct from the other one because they got back onto the track without any more divergent paths, so it tells you about that element, which is real, and that is historical. That's what it's saying.
When Joanna had to play, I thought Priscilla is actually the one we know the least about historically, even though she's been in, the airplane movie, not airplane, police squad. And she's lovely and she's pretty and stuff, but we don't really know much about her. And I thought Joanna had a difficult job having to play this known and yet unknown person. And I don't know how you handle that.
I found, that's the other thing, like with that, I know we had a conversation about her accent, and I sort of, I looked at it and I looked at it from the point of view that she, had been born in a certain location, but then we went one step further and said, well, what was her upbringing? She was a military brat and she went to all these different places, and that was really great because it was like this collaborative thing. Okay, let's develop the character a bit more and make sure that the performance is informed in the right way. And that was fantastic, because I could have completely screwed the pooch on that one, but we didn't. We got it right, and I, that's kind of what I'm talking about in terms of taking a solitary experience of writing and changing it into this really collaborative one, and that's the sense that I get from this community, is that everything's collaborative. You like Kelly said, you know, we get that subject matter expertise, which is really invaluable. So so thanks for that as well. But yeah, I guess just look to wrap things up, because we're nearly out of time. But I wanted to speak about the challenges. You know, what's the thing that you like the most about the job, and what's the thing that is the most challenging? You know, I won't say dislike about the job, because it feels like you love what you do, which is essential for a good life. You know, but what are the things that you really love, and what are the things that are just a little bit challenging at times?
Josh, do you want to start? Because you haven't really talked about creating the cover.
Yeah.
Which is
Oh, of course.
an incredible piece of
Great cover.
art, and it is absolutely,
Oh, the
you know,
cover is
the
fantastic.
phrase they
Kelly
buy
gave
with
me-
their eyes.
Kelly gave me the
gave
Monroe cutout.
everybody-
She's like,
What's
I want
that?
to do something with this Monroe cutout. Kelly handed me that Monroe cutout. She found that somewhere, and she's like, can you do something with this? I was like, I'll see what I can do. And it just all came together perfectly. The text in
Wonderful.
the
The
background,
cover is fantastic.
the text in the background is actually text from the book that I copied and pasted from the book and put into like a typewriter typeface. And it kind of just made that noir aspect to it pop kind of. So
Yeah.
it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Mm.
But I was with this book from the beginning, man. It was like from the creation stage, I was talking to you about it from the very get-go. So it's kind of like, you know, it was really fun to see this come into the world and see it evolve as it had.
Yeah, and Josh, you know, like I think there were times where I hit a trough, and you know, I was struggling to get momentum. You know, there were a couple of things I was going through personally, and you know, I don't think this book would have been written without the encouragement that I got from you during the process. So thanks for that as well.
You're welcome, man. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to be part of it.
No nos lo quiten, esta ley se pueden dar.
Valid point too.
Don't need to translate, Josh.
What was that? Can you hear
You
me?
can't hear her, can
Yeah, I
you?
can hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, no,
You're
you-
Francine. We have
Oh,
no
Francine's
idea
in the
what she said.
Francine
so you
is in the
translate.
They heard you. She's talking to the cat, I think.
That voice good.
So AK, I have a question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
I have a question. Is there going to be a sequel?
Yeah, look,
I'm saying.
I would love to work a sequel, but I don't think it's going to be Jimmy. I think it's going to be more of an Elvis type of sequel. I think Jimmy's he's kind of reached his point, but I think Elvis is sort of Elvis and Hunter make a cool team. I think, you know, I really like that. It was funny actually.
Solving
listening
crimes. Wait, we saw that movie, right? Wait,
Yeah.
it's an alternate version of Fear and Loathing, right?
We'll
that's
do
right,
the
that's
crimes
right.
and then solve them.
Yeah.
I mean,
It'll be
honestly,
like-
that's the
it'll
book
be
right
like,
there. They go to Vegas and everything happens from there. You know, basically. You know,
It'll
That's right,
be
yeah.
like Memento, where the protagonist is actually the criminal. So
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I'd love to step back into that world again. It was, you know, for me, it was so fun and liberating in a lot of ways to write something different to what I'd written before. So yeah, definitely. But
Well, I'm gonna have to share something with you offline, and we'll see if that can happen. I've got some irons in the fire. So
oh, okay, awesome.
We'll definitely, we'll
There's
definitely
this community
talk
at
about
work activating, making plans.
That's exactly right.
There it is. It's
I
right
was
here.
just
gonna
We caught
say
it on
that-
camera.
Okay, so let's oh, go Joanna, go.
Oh, I was just going to say that since you were saying that you see things cinematically when
Yes.
you write, that entire book is so cinematic that it's like insane. It's not a Hollywood movie already. I mean, it really,
Send it to David Lynch.
yeah. I mean,
Well, that's kind of where I'm going. I mean, I don't want to jump the gun, but I have an agent who is shopping
intended.
this to Netflix.
Ooh.
And
Ooh.
the initial
Okay.
feedback is that they see it as a 3-season series where James Dean and Elvis are solving Hollywood crimes.
oh,
Okay.
Fatty Arbuckle crime, finally.
Yeah.
And great. Every every one of my characters got killed off. So I guess I'm
as soon
off.
as she said that, all the voiceover actors are thinking, well, it's another job. I'm not kidding.
Well, how nice for them.
It was actually funny. When I was writing the character of Bull, I had this idea that I would try and lead the audience astray. He's the protagonist. He's going to solve the crime. He's the guy. No, he's not.
Nope. He's
Not quite. Not quite.
Oops. Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah. But okay. So final words. A piece of advice from each of you. Starting with Johnny. About if someone, and Joya might be able to speak to this as well. If you're starting out in audio narration, what is the most in a sentence, what is the thing that you should hold in your head if you're starting out in audio narration?
I'll be brief. There's a million things. I'll take one. Just tell the story simply. Don't overdo it. The author's already done all the heavy lifting. Just share the story. That's it.
That's excellent. Joanna?
It's sort of that. I would say make sure you take at least some kind of an acting class to get yourself kind of immersed in what it's like to portray and to be an actor, and then learn to play. And in an acting class allows you to play. I don't care if you're an accountant and you sit in front of a computer all day. You put somebody in an acting class, an improv class, and let them play. And that's a concept you need for audiobooks.
Neil?
All those things. I feel like I was thinking about saying a lot of those same things, but to add to those, I'd also say in terms of once all that is attended to get ready to play the long game, not necessarily in terms of one thing or the other, but sort of across the spectrum in terms of you're networking into a new industry that's discrete from other industries. You're learning an adjacently new craft that's related to all your same skill sets, and you're feeling your way into author communities in the publishing universe, which is a different universe than most actors dwell in, right? And it's different as an aspect of that. So, but all those are long game things, and that are always going to be continually improving, continually changing. It never stops. There's no arrival. It's all, in that sense, it's all about that destination, and having a lot of patience about that, helps.
Okay, Bill?
I guess I'm going to go back to the question I asked you an hour ago. Did you ever write? Did you ever write a character and then you heard that character and you were felt that somebody really captured it, and that's my point, is that that's when I can get into your head, into the author's mind, understand what he or she has tried to create with an individual character, bring that to life, and then you go, oh my God, you nailed it. That's the highest compliment in the world to me. When I've truly gotten to understand what you tried to bring alive and I brought it alive. And if I may offer one other piece of advice, don't be an asshole like Hank.
Hank really was an asshole. That's right. Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Joya?
So I would say, first of all, it's a lot harder than you think. Anyone who's starting out who wants to do this, it's a lot harder than you think. I can't tell you how many times I read the same lines over and over and over and trying to bring out what I knew it should sound like, but making it believable and making it come across the way that you intended.
And a character that was so unlike you.
And it was a character that is 180 degrees from who I am. I'm not a panic-stricken person. I'm the one who leads everybody out of the cave. The other thing is, make sure that if you are cast in a role, that character actually has lines.
Okay, You've got to tell AK this story.
So-
This is
I'm
actually
playing the mime.
That's a private chat.
So this is quite a funny story. When the book was prepped and I said, I would love to have just a one-liner, just something small as my debut. And I was given the role of Bessie, the phone operator, who is mentioned numerous times, but she doesn't have a single line. And when Bill would say, I need to go in and record, and I would say, my lines are already done. And then he found woman. So make sure your
I
character
memorized
actually
mine.
has that.
Kelly, you kind of you started all this thing. You started everything. And for those of you that don't know, Kelly and I actually met through Reddit. I saw a post by Kelly on a Ask Me Anything. I'm an audio narrator, and I said, "Hey, I'm a writer," and that's how we got together. And I think, what's the experience for you? What's the thing that you would suggest is the most important or most valuable piece of advice? Because I'd love to hear it.
My piece of advice is going to seem strange, but don't overbook yourself, because then you can take the time to enjoy the work instead of just cookie cutter, cranking it out, trying to hit X number of narrations in a year. I would rather do one book and have it be fantastic than do 25 books and feel like I phoned it in.
That's great. That's fantastic. And last but certainly not least, I'm going to ask a different question of Josh. Josh, like, we're obviously both writers, so we're in the same. We're outnumbered. We're surrounded here. But for you,
You're surrounding me, actually.
There in the corner. That's true.
That's exactly. There you go. So I guess from your perspective, Josh, like writing to market as opposed to writing what you love, what's your feel on that? Because I know we both struggle with it from what I hear. So I want to get your take on it. What do you feel in your heart like when you're writing?
I like writing. I like writing what I love. I mean, I tried writing romance for all of 2 days, I think, and I made it to the second chapter, and I just kept cracking myself up. I'd write something like steamy, and I'd just start giggling. I was like,
I did the same thing.
So that was the hardest part for me. I gotta write what I know. I mean, I can write probably like thrillers or stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
But I tried writing the market and was like, I could do a cozy romance, no problem. Because I'd been exposed to enough of them, but no, you got to write what you love. If you want to make a living out of it, then you got to write what sells. But if you do it for the joy of writing, you got to write what you love.
Absolutely, 100%. Look, I maybe one day I'll get there when I just am sick of investigating corruption and fraud. But I think you're dead right. And I think that's come through in this conversation as well, that you're all passionate people. You're all so in it in the moment, and I just But I just want to close out by saying thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show, and it's been an absolute blast working with all of you on Jimmy Dean. You took something that I wasn't even sure was going to exist and made it into so much more. Everybody, from the performances to the production to the cover design to I'm just eternally grateful. It's probably the best thing I've ever written, and the best thing that I've ever heard of mine written. You guys just took it to the next level. So thanks again.
Well, you gave us the great words to work with. It was a fantastic story, and we thank you, my friend.
Yeah.
Let's all break in a kumbaya, shall we?
Yeah. There you go. Get your lighters out. No. I don't want to get too mushy or anything, but thanks, guys.
I love you more.
Yeah. I love you, dude.
For part two, part two, remember that we call lifts elevators over here.
Oh yeah,
That's all I
sorry.
want-
Yeah.
Sorry.
Must
Yeah,
have changed
sorry.
back in
Sorry.
1834 when
Yeah,
they
yeah.
switched and
Tell you something. Writing something in the US from Western Australia in the most remote city in the face of the planet is a unique experience. So
Great, man.
But
I tried writing an Australian character once, and you sounded like stereotypical Crocodile Dundee. It was horrible, man. I was like,
that's
I
not
gotta
a knife.
axe this Australian character.
Yeah.
We just saw that last night. Like for the 15th time.
Johnny, look, I understand you're on the mend from COVID. I want to say speedy recovery to you as well.
I think I'm all better. Thanks.
Yeah,
I feel great.
Hopefully, I think.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of us that were concerned. So it's good to see you up and about, and that you were able to come on the show and give us your time. So, all right, guys, thanks so much, and I'll talk to you again soon, no doubt.
Thank you, sir.
All the best. Bye, everybody.
Bye.